Welcome. I'm James Heimowitz, and I'm the president of China Institute. And it's a delight to welcome you all today for what promises to be a super exciting program. For those of you who are not familiar with China Institute, because today we have the honor and privilege of partnering with the Beijing University Alumni Association of Greater New York, China Institute has been in the business of helping Americans better understand China since 1926 through art, through culture, through education, and through more recently the lens of better understanding business. There's so much happening between China and America beyond the screaming headlines. And today we're taking a deeper dive and look into one of the areas that has actually been at the forefront of helping connect America and China across a bunch of areas, across a business area, across a cultural platform, and actually a way for people to understand each other through how we enjoy film and cinema. And of course, it's more iconic than Hollywood for Americans. So it's with great pleasure. I was just thinking about, when I first studied at Beijing, the concept of having a Beida Alumni Association in Greater New York was beyond imagination. And the fact now that you have so many alumni in the region that are able to partner and join with us is a tremendous pleasure. So I just wanted to say a big welcome and to introduce Ruth Jin, who most recently, among all her different other accolades and things that get attached to her name, is a trustee now of the China Institute. So we're delighted to welcome her and delighted to partner with her and the Peking University Alumni Association. So why don't I pass it over now to Ruth.
Thank you, James. Thank you, China Institute. I'm Ruth Jin, co-chairman of Peking University Alumni Association of Greater New York. We're graduates from Peking University, which is the top university in China. We are mostly first-generation immigrants who made America our new home and are contributing to our local communities with constant thirst for new knowledge. Today, we are very lucky to have 4 distinguished panelists to talk about Hollywood and China. Porter Bibb is managing partner at MediaTek Capital Partners, a private merchant bank. He has more than 40 years of experience as a senior investment banker, specializing in media, entertainment, and technology. Daxing Zhang has spent his last 30 years working on co-production of films with China. His early China co-production films include the Oscar-winning picture, Last Emperor. He was one of the very first mainland Chinese who worked behind the camera in Hollywood, including The Matrix, Charlie's Angels, and Daredevil. Robert Cain is a partner in film production company Pacific Bridge Pictures and founder publisher of China Film Business, China Film Biz. He has worked for more than 25 years in Hollywood and the global entertainment industry. Our moderator, Barry Skidelsky, is a top entertainment attorney with a broad range of skills and experience. He is also the immediate past chair of the Entertainment, Arts, and Sports Law section of the New York State Bar Association. We are so thrilled to have these thought leaders with us today. And with that, Barry, over to you.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you all for participating and attending. The structure of this afternoon's program is essentially that myself as a moderator and each of the 3 panelists will make an initial presentation of a few minutes, and then for the bulk of the program, we'll engage in a conversation that I hope you'll find informative, entertaining, and useful. At the end, we'll set aside some time for questions and answers, at which point, if you have any questions, you can click the raise hand button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. As Ruth mentioned, I am the immediate past chair of the Entertainment Lawyer section for the New York State Bar Association. My self-view is that I'm a very left brain, right brain kind of guy, as I imagine our other panelists think of themselves as in part as well. I was a former radio broadcaster and jazz piano player, studied at Berklee College of Music before I became a lawyer. And so I take great pleasure in being able to use my counseling, transactional, litigation, regulatory skills as a lawyer to help creative talents and the people they deal with create and distribute content. Obviously, as a former general counsel who also currently serves as de facto outside general counsel to a few companies, there's a broad range of law that applies to the entertainment, particularly film, television sectors, entertainment business. And it really does require a team. It requires not only the creative talent, the business side, the legal side, the accounting side, taxes. And all of us are faced with the threshold issue of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. And when I say that, I'm referring to the money. Can you do a deal without the money? Or do you need the money to do a deal first? As we will discuss, there are various ways to finance film productions and distribution that in very broad strokes tracks what Ruth Jin is very familiar with as a corporate securities lawyer. Essentially comes in two flavors, equity and debt. Equity is ownership in a sense, and debt means it's as if it's a loan, you have to repay. There's no share of profit, it's just whatever the terms are of the deal. There are other ways to finance films that we'll get into, but for the moment, I just wanted to lay out that the bulk of the entertainment law practice and business revolves around contracts and copyrights. Copyrights and trademarks as well as patents, but that's not so important to the actual production and distribution of films, are part of what we call intellectual property, as distinguished from real property or land. And the contracts are, as you can imagine, when you watch the end of a film and you see credits roll on for several minutes, how many people are involved with making and distributing a film. There are that many kinds of contracts. You need a contract with to acquire or create the story that you're going to tell, whether it starts with an option agreement on a book or some other underlying right, producer's agreement, director's agreement, actors. At this point, I'm just going to conclude my opening remarks with, again, in a very broad stroke, the making of film and television programs, which to me are misnomers in the 21st century, because everything's digital now. So we don't really use film. It's all digital, television the same way. It's all audiovisual content. At a high level, it's about the content and distribution. And on the business side, we're talking about the development, the production, and the distribution. Those are the three main steps of how a project gets made. So having said all that, I'll shut up now, and I guess I'll turn it over to Porter. Would you like to start and make some opening remarks?
Well, you've kind of set the stage here, Barry, because the film industry worldwide is going through a transactional and transitional period where it's going to end up not looking anything like the movie business for the last 100 years. So digital, you cited as the main cause, and that's true, and it's over the top or streaming that is also really radically changing the way that people look at movies. You talked a little bit about the movie theater business. This was the year that China was supposed to overtake the United States in terms of theatrical box office. That didn't happen because of the pandemic, but it certainly is on track to happen in 2021. There's no question that China will become the world's #1 box office market anywhere, and the U.S., it's problematic what's going to happen to our theater business, which continues to say, we're going to open, we're going to open, we're going to open, but they keep pushing back the opening dates. Right. China is on track to open in another week or so. They tried an early opening 3 months ago, and it was a disaster. They have to be very careful because China, unlike the U.S., is still building movie theaters, thousands of them. And one American company, IMAX, is also building theaters. IMAX has 700 IMAX theaters, giant screen movie theaters in the PRC right now, and they're on track as soon as the pandemic allows to build another at least 50 to 100 theaters. They've been hugely successful. One of the real outstanding marketing successes globally in the film industry. But let's come back to the transition that the entire global movie business is undergoing right now. That's what the subject of this conference today, and the subject of anybody who's in the business has to pay attention to. You mentioned, for example, that there's very little actual film in the film business. It's all digital. Well, that's true to a certain extent, although 3/4 of the Oscar nominee films in 2019 were made on motion picture film. They were not digital, because certain directors and producers appreciate the finer qualities that the film image can produce. So there's probably going to be fewer and fewer films worldwide made on actual motion picture film, but the over-the-top streaming digital pictures that we're all looking at now more and more as we're doing lockdown and stay at home, that is going to be the dominant factor going forward, and it's going to radically change both the economics and the enjoyment that people who love movies are looking to find. It's not the same watching on a 65-inch flat screen in your TV room or in your living room. It is really problematic what's going to happen to the physical movie theaters in the Western world, even though they're going to survive for another decade or more in China.
Thank you. Rob, being that you have a China Film Biz blog, would you like to pick up the ball and move forward?
Sure, yeah, I agree with Porter. Things globally have been changing very dramatically, and it's hard to predict, where the future will be for the entertainment business. I would also just add that the most important international relationship, particularly in the motion picture business, has been the U.S. China business for the last 8 or 10 years. And that has also been really very dramatically affected, particularly in the last 3 years with the new administration in the United States. Both countries have been vitally important. I should say both industries in both countries have been vitally important to one another. China has been a crucially important market, especially for theatrical films from Hollywood. As the rest of the world has flattened out in terms of growth, China has been a growing and, in fact, the largest overseas market now in the last several years for Hollywood films. China's also been a source of a substantial amount of capital. It requires a lot of filmmaking is a cash-intensive business, and when Wall Street kind of turned tail and left the business a while back, Chinese investors stepped in, and that has also changed. There was a very large, robust spate of activity with partnerships. All of the major studios in Hollywood had Chinese funding, and that has all but dried up. There are only a couple of deals that are still active. And on the Chinese side, I would say around the 2011, 12, 13 timeframe, as China was beginning this burst of cinema construction that Porter referred to, they were really relying on Hollywood films to pack the theaters and fill those seats and sell tickets. So I think it's really fair to say that the Chinese cinema business would not be what it is now, the biggest in the world by far, without that early support from Hollywood. Now that's changed. The Chinese industry has grown and matured, and it has really developed its ability to supply itself. And as well, the Chinese audience's tastes have changed and matured. And while they still like Hollywood movies, they've also embraced films from all over the place, including what I thought would probably happen, but wasn't assured, more art house films and independent films and Indian films and Spanish films. So where we are now with the U.S. China relationship, I would say is a big question mark. And we can make some predictions maybe on this discussion, but I don't think anybody really knows where it's heading.
I think you're right. I agree with everything you said, and it's impossible to predict, but we can certainly see where we're at now, what the trends have been, and with that, I guess I'd like to turn it over to Daxing. If you could share some of your insights. You've been involved with lots of productions, co-productions in China as well, right?
Yes, thank you. First of all, everybody, I'm Daxing. I went to Renmin Daxue next door to Beida, so we're neighbors. And then actually I went to Middlebury College, where I was classmate with Rob. and Rob then transferred to a lesser known school called Harvard, so we were out of touch for a while. But anyway, it's good to see him now here. I have been doing film work since the 80s. When I first went back to China in '85, there was no film industry per se in China, right? And I did get involved with a few like La Last Emperor, a few co-productions at the time. And then I just want to say on tail of what everybody else just said, when I came to LA in the 90s, I went to a class at UCLA where the professor said, worldwide distribution-wise, it went by U.S. domestic, very, very strong. Rest of the world, which means international, anywhere outside the U.S., less so. And there was no mentioning of China. So these are the orders. Now today, obviously, it's all flipped. That China is probably number one. Yeah, U.S., maybe the rest of the world is even stronger than that. So things really have changed in the last 20 years. And for myself, I can only speak more, is that during this time, I've been engaged in, it so happened, pretty much all of the co-productions or productions that involves China or something from China. For example, The Matrix, right? They hired this outstanding man, Wu Ping, to do the action choreography. And I was part of that team. That's how I started producing afterwards. But it is a very unique animal, and it requires cross-cultural thinking and also single cultural thinking. You got to have your own culture. You got to realize what your audience really is. People always say, okay, we make a movie so that benefits both the American audience and the Chinese audience and the rest of the world. Well, good luck. A lot of people tried even one audience, they failed miserably, and now you're trying to say, well, I can make a movie on all three. I am, I'm more than willing to share anything that I know because it's fascinating. And I have to say it's not easy, but to finish this brief self-intro, I do agree with everybody before that the landscape has changed. And yet the demand is at least the same, if not higher. So if we do the right thing, we find the right niche, we'll hit the right core. It is very, very promising. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm surprised to hear, if I understood correctly, both you and Rob went to Middlebury. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a UVMer from Burlington, so go know that there'd be 3 Vermonters on this. Porter, sorry, man, but Green Mountain State rules. Hello. And that's where I got my start, actually, in radio, Burlington, Vermont. It's just a beautiful place. Anybody who's listening or watching, if you haven't been to Vermont, go. It's a beautiful place, obviously, once travel restrictions ease up. So the overarching theme that I think we're talking about here is globalization and a transition. I appreciate the comment, I think it was Porter maybe made about, it's not the same sitting in your living room with a home theater and surround sound, even with that. I enjoy communing with my fellow New Yorkers, sitting in the dark and eating popcorn. There's just something about the social experience of all of us at the same time witnessing. Obviously, communications technology or media has evolved from the simple broadcasting model of one to many to where now people are liking, sharing, it's many to many. And as we see not only the internet evolving, but here comes new television standards that's going to allow for interactive two-way communication. And I don't just mean people sitting there with their second screen of phone, liking or making some comments while a program or a film is running. 5G is rolling out. It's sad, but we all know, I don't want to get political here, the shortcomings of the current administration and the federal government here. This business with travel, you know, the trade tariffs, trade war, Huawei, all this is just not productive. Like the China Institute, I think that film and television projects, when I said they're sort of misnomers, I think of like the entertainment business. What is it? It's entertainment or it's a business? There's a real opportunity to tell stories and unite people and help us better understand each other, not just between Americans and Chinese, but globally. And that's the hope. That's the hope as this all rolls out. There was mention that China, until the COVID virus or coronavirus hit, at the worst possible time for China during the holiday season, early 2020 here. If I have it right, the numbers were something like box office revenue. It was a little less than 10 million for the U.S. and a little more than 10 million for China. But right now, with productions being shut and theaters being shut, God knows what the whole year will be. So I'm wondering, Porter, if you follow that, if you can share any insights about what is and what you see as the trends for the next like 5 years in terms of how many films get produced, dollar numbers at the box office, etc.
Well, you have to take it sector by sector. In the movie theater side, the largest chain in the United States happens to be AMC, which is owned by Wanda, a Chinese company. They are approaching financial bankruptcy right now. It's uncertain how many of the AMC theaters are actually going to open up once the lockdown is eased a little bit. China is in a similar situation where, despite the fact that they're still building movie theaters across the PRC, the government is estimating that somewhere between 30 and 40% of those theaters are actually never going to open up. They're going to be bankrupt as well. So what you have is something that always happens in emerging industries. There's consolidation, and a few companies are going to end up ruling the roost. That's going to be the way the movie theater side goes, but it's also going to be the production and distribution side as well. It's interesting that China has, they're churning out several thousand film students, graduate film students every year at the Beijing Film Academy and the other film schools around the country. They're also, if I can say, one of my high points in the film business was opening the first commercial film animation studio in the PRC in the early 1980s in Shenzhen. When we got the permission from the government to do this, our customers were primarily U.S. animation companies led by Disney. Disney bought the business 10 years after we founded it, and a Chinese company bought Disney out a couple of years ago. That is something that you're going to see more and more happening because, as both Rob and Daxing have mentioned, it's a cooperative and collaborative industry, and co-productions, interestingly, are in China. They're few and far between compared to the total number of productions that are released every year in China, but they represent something like 65% of the revenue and even a greater percentage of the profit that all films in China make. And I think you're going to see a trend more and more, not just between the US and China, because there are many co-productions with European and Chinese companies, with Latin American, and let's keep India politics notwithstanding, because they produce more films than any other country in the world every year. They're a culture and a film industry that is going to gain traction and a lot of attention around the world, but particularly in China. I think you have to also look at the fact that very few companies relative to the total number of production entities in both the US and China control the making of motion pictures. There are maybe a dozen companies that represent about 90% of the film industry in the United States, and it's a similar percentage in China, despite the fact that it's the number of filmmakers who are coming into the market every year are in the thousands, and they haven't really been able to strike it rich the way the dozen major established film production companies are making most of the profit right now. So consolidation and co-productions, I think, are going to be the order of the day going forward. The world, if you, I apologize for using this comparison, but the pandemic really spread because of globalization and the fact that everybody can travel so easily and so quickly around the world and carry that virus, which spread much faster than anybody ever could imagine a couple of years ago. Well, the same kind of globalization is going to impact the motion picture industry, and you're going to see more and more Chinese co-productions with Western companies, and you're going to see a co-production of the content. You cannot anymore rely on the intuition and the creative instincts of the filmmakers, because digitization and artificial intelligence and machine learning are dictating what kinds of films get made and how they're made and where they're distributed. And more of that is going to be determined by the audiences, not by the creators.
That's interesting. Rob, given your experience, particularly with your China Film Biz blog, when Porter was talking about technology, what came through my mind is, as film companies, production companies all around the world are struggling to emerge and get back into, quote, the new normal, with new safety standards in place, fewer people on set at any given moment, staggered schedules, all of those safety protocols. I was thinking about the technology. When you said AI, I thought about VFX and animation. Maybe
Yes.
that's a thing now in the wake of the coronavirus eruption that might take more of a center stage and have more universal appeal, global appeal, with, obviously easy to translate, soundtracks. So Rob, I wonder if you have any thoughts on those aspects, what I'm talking about.
Absolutely right, Barry, 100%. And I can speak from a personal example of how some of the adjustment and adaptation is taking place to the pandemic and the changes that it's wrought. Around January, February, we started to see live action production beginning to be curtailed, and certainly by late March, it was really shut down. A live action production, a set, requires close collaboration with many people, usually at least 100 or more. The performers can't wear masks if they're going to be on camera. It can be a tricky and potentially dangerous environment. So out of caution, everything was shut down. But what didn't shut down was, and in fact, what has been growing and benefiting is the animation business, where most of the work can be done in through remote collaboration. And so a partner and I have launched an animation company. It's called TuneIn. And there's a technology component to that, which I can talk about in a second. But essentially what we've done is we've put together a syndicate of animation companies from around the world that can no longer work together in the same ways that they did, showing up in person at markets to sell their product, to work together, to travel back and forth to work together. So what we've done is, in fact, 2 of our member companies are in China. There's another in Korea, Malaysia, and we've got a handful in Europe and South America. We're based in Los Angeles, and we're coordinating the activities of creating new animation projects, producing them together, and then distributing and administering the distribution, all via the internet. We're going to be starting to set up a cloud processing project, which will facilitate the online collaboration in terms of bringing assets together to create animation, the administration of contracts. So technology is playing a big role, and it's really making possible a pretty rapid shift, at least for my partner and I, and for a lot of the animation industry. And fortunately, it's been a good time because the Netflixes, the Amazons, and they now have an enormous appetite for animation. People are staying home. They need to have something for the kids. And also they can't get live action content anyway. So it's been a very good time with a lot of growth in demand for animated product, and we're able to fulfill it.
Sounds like a great idea. I can only imagine that the animation studios in your TuneIn world will hopefully be able to tilt that balance back away with leverage that Amazon now has, or Netflix rather has, where business models are getting upended. It used to be, whenever here in New York I would talk to a fellow entertainment lawyer in LA, the conversation would invariably turn to points on the back end, which has always been illusory to me, in large part due to Hollywood accounting.
Yes.
I'm sorry, guys. I know the film grossed $1 gazillion, but we had a lot of expenses, and it reminds me of the producers from Mel Brooks about this old lady's got 50%, that old lady's got 50%. So I'm going to give you 120% of the net, but there is no net because it's all about contracts and how they're defined. But that should tilt the leverage, and I think that's a really good idea. which brings me to, in my head, the broader topic of financing. Co-production to me is one way of financing a project. There are tax incentives, there's equity, there's debt, but co-production itself with China, whether it's the United States or any other country, has to do in substantial part with import quotas that have been around since China joined the WTO a decade or so ago, that have little to do with Trump's trade war, which to me is mostly a distraction. It's all about, I want to get reelected, but I won't say more about that. So let me ask Daxing if he would pipe in at this moment about if he could elaborate us or explain to us a little bit about the quotas on imported films and how co-production essentially is treated as a domestic product in China, I suppose.
Yes. To make it simple, right? A co-production project in China, when the movie is being sold, it enjoys almost as much profit allowed by the government than a China domestically made film, almost. Whereas if you make a U.S. and American, or for that matter, any other country, a movie you want to sell to China, number one, there are quotas. And I think with the large, I don't know about it now today, but it used to be like 34, plus technology oriented movies, a little more. So only a dozen pictures allowed on the big screen for China. And there are also smaller, what they call PPR. They are also in the back end. So when you make money, when you make profit, the money allowed to take back out is much less than a co-production in the China domestic picture. The specifics you can always find them online. They're not secret. So for that reason alone, it makes co-production very attractive. And yet, I have an animation picture, and that was all shot in China, in Canada, but we have to make it up by having something done in China so that qualifies as co-production, which it does. And by the way, just follow up what Robin, you were talking about animation pictures. Our movie was made for 11, boasting 12 million Canadian dollars. It wasn't as great, and Netflix was not that interested until this time, where the salespeople are saying that Netflix and Amazon, they're basically betting on our movie right now as we speak, because they need content. There's no movie coming out of pipeline being affected by this virus, a pandemic. So anyway, going back to co-production, it is a potentially profitable thing, and probably it's a safer way to make larger size pictures. And the question is always, in the end, the content, which I'll be very happy to talk about. It's a big subject.
I guess I'll make this a jump ball question. Anybody who would like to respond. How do the content restrictions in China affect the stories that are told? I mean, it's one thing to be a filmmaker and you get a script and you pull your team together and you hope that it comes close to your vision. But in the end, somebody wants their girlfriend in the movie, somebody wants to change whatever. But how might storylines change in the post-outbreak era?
Let me just jump on that. Sorry, let me just say that Vermont, right? UVM and very famous poet from Vermont, Robert Frost, once said that to write poems without rhyme, without rules, is like playing tennis without the net. And I've always told people encouragingly that when you are facing censorship, whether governmental or cultural, treat that as a net. Of course, there's a limit. You can't say, you know, there's too much. But there are cases, there have been cases where the rules does not allow certain thing, and you, by jumping over that net, you achieve a higher result. So, you know, again, there are specifics, but that's just my initial response to my fellow promoter.
Yeah, Daxing, that's an interesting point of view, an interesting comment. Although I don't think either one of us are in favor of the restrictions that are in place, they do create a space for innovation and creativity. In fact, Hollywood had in the 1930s and 40s also a very strict censorship code called the Hays Code. And some of Hollywood's greatest movies ever were made during that period. So it confined what could be done on screen and what could be said, but it also sparked a lot of creativity around those rules. And I think China, you could say the same thing. Now, of course, most of us would prefer that these rules were not in place at all, because they do affect everything that you can do, and they do limit the topics you can talk about and the content and the nature of it. But I like your point, though. I think that's very well said.
What do you guys think has been the biggest co-production success between China and the United States in film? Or one of them, other than Mulan?
Which, yeah, has yet to release.
Right.
I'm not sure there has been one that you could really call a success between China and the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did. I'm trying to. There have been many attempts to achieve that designation from the Chinese government. Usually, they've gone a long way. Like, for instance, Iron Man 3 tried to get that. It was a very successful film in both markets, but ultimately, it was not granted that designation. It did wind up getting some of the advantages anyway of being of a co-production, but it didn't really get that official title, and it didn't get some of the benefits because of that.
Do you agree with the concept that the United States or the American film industry, I hate that word industry, gets more money from overseas distribution than domestic?
That actually is the case today. It changed a couple of years ago, where overseas, outside the U.S. distribution really was 30 or 40% at the most of total revenues that major film distributors produced. But today, it's about 51% offshore, and it's getting larger percentages every year. One of the things, though, that I think is worth some comment in terms of the creativity of content is the fact that technology, algorithms, and audience responses are more and more going to dictate the kinds of films that are going to get made. And it's inescapable. Netflix lives on algorithmic profiles that their viewers create when they click on a particular title. And Netflix spent $18 billion producing and buying motion pictures for distribution over the top last year. They will go higher than that this year, probably 20 billion. Which is more than all of the major film studios in Hollywood spent making product last year.
Is that a good thing to have algorithms rule?
No, I don't. I think it's a very worrisome thing, but it's inescapable because it does produce results for the content distributors like Netflix. You're going to see more and more movies of the same ilk, because that's what the data tells us. So I think that we have to keep our fingers crossed and hope that the creativity that has always been able to beat out technology, continues to inspire filmmakers to make unusual and non-algorithmic content.
Compelling, engaging stories. It's an art and a science. In my head, I'm thinking back when Pandora and Spotify first rolled onto the scene. Radio broadcasters were freaking out about, but there's no curation. You're just going to have the algorithms dictate a playlist. And it seems that we're headed towards that future where Skynet will control what gets made and distributed, really?
Well, it also, you're going to see an acceleration of major films that don't start out in the traditional exhibition formula of opening in movie theaters. Disney was planning on bringing Hamilton, for example, out in the theaters later this year. They moved it up because they didn't know when the movie theaters were going to be back in business, and they showed it on July 3rd. It grossed $100 million for Disney Plus in terms of the subscriber revenue that it created and the increase in subscribers that Disney Plus was able to generate through that one movie. So you're going to see more and more direct to streaming, even for major motion pictures. I think Disney is probably wrestling as we speak right now with what to do with Mulan, because it's been postponed 3 times and there's still no definite release date in the United States or China. And
you mentioned before about AMC struggling with bankruptcy. The thought occurred to me during this conversation about, I know what we can do with the theaters, at least in New York, empty theaters. We turn them into classrooms so parents don't have to worry about sending their kids back to school.
I'll tell you an innovation that the Chinese movie theater chains have introduced, and it's technology driven. They have on a number of major Chinese films, they open and close the film with direct streaming from the actors, the producers, the director, talking directly to the movie theater audience about the film, just as we are here via Zoom. And that's something that is a very appealing attraction for the moviegoer, to be able to talk to the creators and have a Q&A session after they've watched a motion picture in a movie theater.
Universal.
Hi, Barry and the speakers. Sorry to interrupt. We have 10 minutes for questions. For the audience who'd like to ask a question, please click the raise hand button and then I can unmute you.
Thank you.
Okay, I see 2 questions.
Shoot.
Jeffrey Tao, you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Jeffrey, can you speak up?
Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for a very interesting discussion. And I have a question actually for all of the members of the panel, and that is, I've enjoyed enormously sort of Chinese drama series on Netflix that draw upon sort of the rich heritage of Chinese mythology and history, culture in general, and they're sort of a drama series, and they seem to be quite good. Some of them are very funny, the acting is sophisticated, and the productions are quite lavish. So is there a future for movies, for films, to be sort of moved to live streaming, to Netflix in the future? Is there a future for that kind of direction?
Well, if you're asking whether are you asking whether Chinese dramas can be distributed overseas?
Chinese dramas or Chinese films, Chinese drama series. I mean, Chinese dramas they're already being seen here on Netflix, and they're quite popular. But actually, say a co-production like The Last Emperor, if there's another one like that on a historical theme.
Yeah,
is there a future on Netflix for that versus a movie theater?
Netflix did mount a co-production, I want to say about 6 or 7 years ago, called Marco Polo. Yeah, that one ran into some, let's just say, some internal difficulties. It wasn't very successful for them. I don't think anyone should look at that as a reason not to pursue future projects. But there's a lot of complexity in at least the U.S. China producing relationship that makes it hard to pull those kinds of co-productions off. I agree with you. I think there's certainly a lot of creative opportunities, so many great stories in Chinese mythology and Chinese history. But it may take other co-production partners than the U.S. Korea has done obviously a great job of distributing their dramas around the world. I was I can't take any credit, but a small part, and was a close observer of how they pulled that off. And I think there's some great lessons for China as to, to look at how Korea did that. There was a true government industry collaboration, and some government policy, a 5-year plan that really sparked what became a revolution and led to that, what do they call the Hala, the Korean wave, not just filmed entertainment, but music as well. I think China certainly has that potential, but it's going to take some commitment from the right people in the right places in China. It doesn't just happen. It really has to be driven.
As a lawyer, when I think of copyrights, I think of the transformative uses that one single work can have. You can take a comic book and turn it into a movie, and turn that into a Broadway play, and then turn that into a TV show, and turn that into a musical, with so many different means of distribution now available. New streaming services rolling out almost every week. NBC's Peacock is just the latest that I know of. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for people who desire to create and tell a story. It doesn't have to be all tentpole blockbusters based on a comic book super action hero. I do agree with, I forget whose comment it was before, but essentially there's no one size fits all. There's no way to make a particular film or television project be of global appeal. I think that's very difficult to do, but there are certainly universal themes that people all over the world, United States, China, everywhere, we're all concerned with our families, our own individual prosperity, our collective prosperity. And to anybody who might be watching, who might be interested in trying to make their dreams come alive, I just say, do it, go for it. Yeah. So I would like to be encouraging. We only have about 5 minutes left. If there's anybody in the audience that has a question that...
Yes, we have another question from Carrie Osborne. Carrie, you're on.
All right, hello, thank you. It's a very interesting group of people, very interesting discussion. Going to, well, following up on Jeffrey Tao's last piece about the historical, I think that there's very much, the more that we have collaboration and the more, as you say, things move around the world, the more that we see a world family. I'm a former New York City public education teacher, and I did a piece with Morris, I believe was his name, Morris, I can't remember his surname, on the Silk Road at China Institute. It was fantastic. which I can understand with the feelings why the Marco Polo piece maybe had troubles also in its funding. But so my question about the, like when you talk about the censorship of the 1930s and 40s that were in the that were in the States, in Hollywood, and yet in the 1930s and 40s there was sort of a it brought about sort of a normalcy, if you want to call it even a white normalcy. Last week also there was Bhutan Phoenix was part of the China Institute's program, and he was saying about his time. He's a rapper from the Bronx, or from Brooklyn. So the question is, can there be historical pieces about sort of collaboration people that are existing who are wanting for history to be noted? The reason that he's not doing more about the rapper piece in China now is because he feels that rap in China has become, I don't know, pop art. There's no history behind it. So will there be stories, will there be opportunities for stories such as people from the Chinese diaspora who are in the States for like this history of this collaboration experience is? Because I think that those sorts of stories would be fantastic to be taught and be shown because they're rich.
Okay, I will jump on that. By the way, I've changed the location a little bit. The answer yes and no. Yes, in that, you know, a story told from the heart is always touching and affecting, regardless, to the audience that would want to watch this movie. And the no is that, you know, it is an industry, is a business. If your budget is too high, most of the, like I said earlier in my introduction time, that most of the audiences in the world prefer their own story. They don't really care that much. You have to be bicultural because you're a bicultural person, you're a bicultural filmmaker, and yet when it comes to the product, you got to know what your audience is. So the answer is yes and no. If it's too large, then, you know, you may not get your investors' money back. If it's you know, too small, obviously the movie is not made very, very well. So that's always a challenge. Hope I answered your question.
Very good. If there are no more questions,
I have a question. So it's from Li Jin, and I'm gonna read it to you. Is there a future between China and Hollywood, regardless of the geopolitical competition?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
On that happy note that we all can agree,
Well,
it's collaboration, not competition, baby. That's where it's at.
I would say there aren't that many people. I think everybody here on this panel, I would count among them, but there aren't that many people who have the depth of experience and knowledge of both cultures and both industries to really bring about the kind of collaboration you're asking about and a relationship. I think it's only going to happen if there are people who have that understanding, that sensitivity, and that desire to work together to make it happen. I'm optimistic. I happen to be very optimistic because the potential opportunity is just too large. But it's going to require certain people, and again, we're not trying not to be too political here, but I would say people in both governments to get out of the way, or even better, to really support and drive this collaboration. At the moment, the governments are what's I think the biggest factor getting in the way.
Okay, the last question will be from Dinda Elliott, Director of Programs at the China Institute. Dinda, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for this great conversation. I think that your comment just now, Rob, was really the best way to end this. But I did have one quick question of clarification, which was just, you know, you all talked about how co-production is the name of the game going forward, and that's really the safest way to produce films. You know, if you're a Hollywood company, whatever, doing, you know, approaching the Chinese market, et cetera. And yet you all said you couldn't think of a co-production that had been a big smash success. So I'm just confused about that. If you can clarify a little bit. Thanks so much.
Well, the co-productions that have worked, that have been most successful in China, have been the ones between, and this is sort of a technicality, but the ones between China and Hong Kong. There have been many of those. It's really Hong Kong producers bringing their skill, their storytelling ability, and their understanding of the Chinese market to work together with mainland Chinese companies. And those, you know, probably half of the big hits in China, that may be an exaggeration, but not much, have been China, Hong Kong co-productions. There just haven't been any examples that I can think of films that were made between China and the U.S. that have had great market success. And we could spend another whole panel talking about why that is, but there just haven't been. There have been attempts to make movies that work for both audiences. What was the one, The Great Wall?
Right. That's sort of the reverse. That's sort of the reverse. Instead of American writers changing, sort of self-censoring to get what they would hope would be approval by Chinese regulatory authorities, it's the other way around. Chinese put Matt Damon, an American, in a lead role in a Chinese production, right?
Yeah, it was actually American producers and writers who put that together. If anybody's seen it, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but I thought it was a terrible movie. It did okay in China, did no business in the United States.
It's no Fast and Furious. It's no. All right. Well, with that, I think we're out of time, and I want to thank Rob, Daxing, and Porter, as well as the China Institute and the Peking University Alumni Association of Greater New York for having us all today. And to all of you at home watching, say the secret word, win $100. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. And I guess we'll continue this down the road. Thanks again, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.